Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican, here as always to bring you the truth, but truth-flavored bias. Last time I talked about Goro Majima from Yakuza 0, and today I will talk about Kiryu Kazuma from the same game. Both men are homosexual protagonists, however, Kiryu Kazuma is a different subspecies of homosexual than Goro Majima. Today we look at Kiryu Kazuma, latent homosexual. In Yakuza 0, Kiryu is 20 years old, he has a job, and he has a decent amount of money. So you might be thinking he's going to be getting laid quite a bit because he is a horny young man and that's the natural thing to do. But that's not how it goes. He gets no women in Yakuza 0. And I think that this is not for lack of trying, but rather because he deliberately wanted to fail, but he had to go through the motions in order to disguise his true orientation. Consider the facts. Despite having multiple women hit on him, Kiryu always acts weird and never gets with anybody. He only puts himself in situations where he's almost guaranteed not to succeed with women. One of the things that he does in order to cover his tracks is he attends the Telltale Boys Club. The name itself sounds pretty gay. But beyond that, it is a phone dating service where you talk to women. The only dates he ends up getting are with a male kidnapper. Apparently he thinks that this person has an extremely sexy voice and he can't determine that it's a man, which tells you a lot about what Kiryu likes. He also has a date with a transformer, and he apparently doesn't really end it immediately. And he also has a date with an older woman, and he can't even pull that off because she ends up just punching him in the stomach and taking his money. He also makes some friends and doesn't really try to put any moves on him. He befriends a clerk at a convenience store, he befriends the bowling alley attendant Amiri, and he also meets Reina at the bar. We'll come back to Reina later. At any rate, Kiryu has plenty of opportunities, and a lot of these women demonstrate some degree of interest, yet he does nothing. It's not because he can't do anything, it's because he doesn't want to, and maybe he's not fully aware of it. He is, after all, a latent homosexual. The biggest giveaway that Kiryu has latent homosexual tendencies is that he has an excessively close relationship with a boy he grew up with named Nishikayama. He calls him Nishiki, which is a kind of diminutive nickname that one would only give usually to a lover. Sometimes to a friend, but usually to somebody that you have some romantic interest in. They grew up together, they're fiercely loyal and protective of one another, and they have a lot of really emotionally charged scenes that are somewhat sus. In many ways, Nishikayama is unofficially Kiryu's girlfriend, and everyone kind of understands that, as we'll see. The Dojima family knows that if they want to really get to Kiryu, who is physically very strong and hard to hurt in that way, the key is to threaten Nishiki. Reina at the bar is really interested in Nishiki, but she understands that Nishiki loves Kiryu, so she wants to meet Kiryu and win Nishika that way, and over time she seems to kind of give up on that dream because she kind of realizes that maybe Nishika and Kiryu are a little bit more than friends, and maybe Nishiki talking about Kiryu all the time is actually a sign that that is where he wants to place his penis. One of the major characters in the background of Yakuza 0 is Kiryu's mentor, Captain Kazuma. Kiryu and Nishika regard Kazuma as more than a father. He ran the orphanage that they were raised in, and they wanted to follow in his footsteps and become Yakuza. Both of them do that, of course, although Nishika pretty much just follows his sort of unofficial lover, Kiryu. Kiryu tries very hard to imitate the manner of dress and bearing of Captain Kazuma, because he understands that he needs a strong male role model to model himself after. This is also a good way for him to hide his homosexual tendencies and to gain acceptance by the Yakuza, because Captain Kazuma has been very successful there. Nishika is much more flamboyant, and his tendencies are much more obvious. He's really into fashion, and He likes to try to tell Kiryu how to dress because he wants to dress him up and control him, which is weird. Anyway, he also shows a lot of jealousy that Kiryu tells him that he modeled his dress after Captain Kazuma, and he said instead he should ask Nishika for advice. Kiryu may have some level of attraction to Kazuma, but that would be extremely latent. His loyalty also may have come from some kind of previous romantic encounter. Perhaps the captain was into younger boys who were at his orphanage. We don't really know for sure. The orphanage also had girls, but given that Captain Kazuma is a very cunning, sort of brutal guy, and that he runs this orphanage, he must have some ulterior motive. He clearly recruits kids out of it to become his servants in the Yakuza, and I don't think he would be above using them sexually either. One of the major themes of Kiryu's story from beginning to end is that he has significant sexual tension with Kuze, one of the lieutenants of the Dojima family. Kuze is a competitor of Kazama and wants to take his position as captain. Early on, he tries to frame Kiryu for murder and then try to seduce and win him over. In theory, Kiryu would be his understudy, but it's very clear that there is a lot of sexual tension between them when they meet and when they fight. They always make sure to take their shirts off, and Kuze fights desperately for Kiryu. Later on, he tells him, after Kiryu's already beaten him a few times and he keeps challenging him anyway, that it is his man's pride which drives him forward, but that is not what's going on. It is rather the desperation of a lover scorned, who thinks that he can still win Kiryu over. Even after claiming he's going to kill Kiryu this, that, or the other, every time he's beaten, he then shows some respect for Kiryu as a Yakuza, as a man, and gives him information that he was not even asked to give. So clearly, Kuze has strong feelings for Kiryu. Kiryu does not seem to quite reciprocate a lot of those feelings, however. Kuze clearly is looking for a pederastic relationship with Kiryu, but Kiryu is not quite as interested in that, and probably not as interested at all because he has this kind of latent attraction to Nishika. Awano, one of the other lieutenants, also makes a pass at Kiryu, but Kuze is definitely the main suitor, and once Awano is turned down, he just kind of lets it go. He's more of a kind of casual seducer. Kuze wants Kiryu to recognize his body and his prowess, which is always why he shows him his body by taking his shirt off when they fight. And apparently Kiryu was not really that impressed, and also he was younger and stronger than Kuze, so he was not really all that impressed by Kuze's fighting techniques either. Two other male characters who really interact with Kiryu quite a bit are Tachibana and Oda. Kiryu became quickly loyal to Tachibana, even though he initially had no interest in him, and even though Tachibana is a fairly strange man with a fake hand. As for Kiryu and Oda, they quickly became friends and bonded. They sort of had an older brother, younger brother dynamic going on, and for Kiryu it was nice to have an older role model. He does have a chance when they pick up Makoto, however, because Kiryu and Makoto seem to have had a little bit of a positive repertoire at first, and she seems to really trust him. However, even though Kiryu is able to see, and the game makes it clear that Makoto is very attractive, even to the point that Majima, who is homosexual, seems to understand it, Kiryu doesn't notice, and that in itself is bizarre. You could argue maybe he was just interested in the mission to the point of blocking all the distraction out, but a young man of 20 will not be able to not notice that a woman is attractive. It's just not possible, biologically speaking. Eventually, Kiryu is in such great mourning for the loss of his two male friends that he doesn't care very much when Makoto goes missing. Majima is much more bothered by it than Kiryu, even though it was pretty much on Kiryu's watch that she went missing in the first place. So it's very odd the way he reacts, and it sort of shows where his priorities are. But again, I believe that this is at a latent level and not an explicit one. I don't think Kiryu is aware that his lack of interest in Makoto is due to homosexual tendencies. One of the most obvious and blatant hints that we get in Yakuza 0 that Kiryu is a homosexual is because he forms a strong relationship with a character named Miracle Johnson, who clearly is supposed to be Michael Jackson. When not Michael Jackson takes an obvious interest in Kiryu, Kiryu isn't weirded out. He's all about hanging out with Miracle Johnson, and he's all about deepening their ties together. Later, they go into business together, and Miracle gives him overly expensive advice for his real estate business. In the first scene where Kiryu encounters Miracle Johnson, they're doing a music video where men dressed as zombies physically attack Miracle while he's trying to do the moonwalk, and Kiryu has to run around and beat the shit out of them to protect him. Symbolically, this is Kiryu playing the hero and Miracle Johnson playing the damsel in distress. It heavily implies a homosexual bond between the two men, and I think the symbolism is obvious enough that even Kiryu, who isn't the sharpest star in the sky, had to recognize it. The dance they do together at the dance club, and then Kiryu first having to beat up the guard, who must have been some ex-boyfriend of Miracle, in order to get to his man, is symbolic of the competition of love. In all of their interactions, both of them at least, we see clearly that Kiryu has to compete for Miracle's affections the way that men often have to fight for their women and compete with others to win their affection. So it is the very traditional mating pattern playing out between Kiryu and Miracle, even though both of them are men. Another time when we see the latent homosexuality of Kiryu is in the BDSM sub-story. Kiryu's running by a BDSM club, and a mistress is really struggling to humiliate her client. She then asks Kiryu for help because she thinks he looks big and tough and like he could talk some real shit. So he gives her advice. Why did she ask him? Well, I think that she knows to ask because she has gaydar. And even before being gay openly was acceptable, a lot of women kind of knew dudes who were gay and could pick up on that kind of shit. Kiryu understands how to appeal to men because he has an attraction to them. Again, he's not quite aware of what his feelings are, but he clearly has some latent homosexual tendencies. He also knows about honor and dishonor due to his Yakuza training, and a lot of what the Yakuza teach is based directly on what the samurai believed. Outside of giving her tips on oral sex, Kiryu was pretty explicitly acting as a homosexual during the sub-story, talking about what you need to say to men to degrade them, because the advice he was giving her was explicitly of a sexual nature rather than more general, as in how to break someone's spirit as you're trying to collect money from them to get them to not swing at you. So this is him acting as a homosexual and sort of letting his guard down for just a minute. And now for the most disturbing sub-story of pretty much any game ever. Kiryu buys a young boy a porn magazine. Now, I don't really care what kind of immorality and debauchery the Chinese get themselves into, but that should not have been in the US release of the game. It simply should not have. Kiryu is approached by a boy who wants him to buy a porn magazine from a really shitty looking vending machine in a back alley. He had asked his mom, but obviously his mom, being a human being adult who could fog a mirror, said no. So Kiryu promised before seeing what the kid wanted to help him, and then because of the promise, supposedly he is forced to help him. That is a really messed up sense of honor. and clearly Kiryu should be facing jail time for this decision. I think it is strong evidence that Kiryu might develop some pedophilic tendencies. I'm now pretty afraid to play these sequel games because I have no idea what kind of horrible things an older Kiryu might get himself into. Kiryu was uncomfortable not because he thought that giving a porn magazine to a kid was wrong, but because he was worried about being seen by random middle-aged women while buying a skin mag. I think this completely undermines the idea of Kiryu as a hero, and if the game had been better written, this would have helped to set up Kiryu for a heel turn rather than having Majima snap at the end. They should have instead had Kiryu snap, or made Majima buy the porn mag for the kid. That would have made a lot more sense. All of the sub-stories we talked about so far possibly could be interpreted other ways. I don't think there are better interpretations, but there probably are other interpretations. However, when it comes to the mutual masturbation subplot, it really can't be seen any other way. There was a guy in the porn store who was telling Kiryu about a video that was simply amazing, and he convinced Kiryu that he had to watch it, and he watched it with him. Rather than use his fighting skills and physical strength to kick the man out of the booth so he could watch the video by himself like a normal person at a porn theater, Kiryu allowed the guy to be in the room with him and allowed the guy to spank his monkey. This is an instance where, at best, Kiryu failed to use his one great gift of physical prowess. But I think it's pretty clear that Kiryu is an assertive character and doesn't hesitate to kick somebody's ass if he thinks that they're in the wrong. So clearly he did not think that this was a problem. Later, this guy wants to meet the girl, and Kiryu helps to set the guy up with a lookalike of the girl. They don't know it's a lookalike, but it turns out to be. When they do eventually meet and figure out this confusion, it turns out that she is not really interested in the video boy, but she does find Kiryu to be very attractive. Now, at this point, the jerk-off guy has struck out. So Kiryu should say, "Too bad, so sad, wasn't the right girl. I'm going to take this girl home and show her my Korean barbecue." But instead, he lets her go. Doesn't try. He doesn't hit the home run. The girl basically says, like, "Yeah, this Kiryu guy, I want a piece of that." And he just walks away. It's bizarre. It's because he wasn't really that into the video. He was more into having Video Boy jerk off in the same room as him. And again, Kiryu was very young at the time and clearly unable to articulate his feelings. He grew up in a very macho society, but the fact that he allowed a man to jerk off with him is a clear indication that he has some very strong latent homosexual tendencies. And not only that, but it seems like he would feel weird about this afterwards, upon thinking about it. But when the video guy shows up to Tachibana Real Estate and offers to help Kiryu, he hires him immediately, no questions asked, because he wants it to happen again. He wants to be in a room with this guy and have him jerk off. Because again, Kiryu Kazuma is a latent homosexual. That's all I have to say about Yakuza 0. I'm Remarkable Republican, bringing the truth with truth-flavored bias, signing out.